I never thought the day would come when my own daughter would look me in the eye and say those words, pay rent or leave. 65 years old, and that sentence hit me harder than any storm I'd ever weathered. It wasn't just about money. It was about what those words meant, about where they came from, and most of all, about who said them. Her name is Leela. She used to call me Papa with the kind of sweetness that could melt any man's anger. I raised her after her mother passed, just the two of us in that big house on Maple Street. Every scraped knee, every failed test, every heartbreak, she ran to me first. I gave her everything, not because I had to, but because I wanted to, because that's what fathers do. But time has a cruel way of twisting things. You blink, and suddenly that little girl in pigtails is a grown woman with a mortgage, a career, and a sharp tongue that doesn't remember the warmth it used to carry. It started, small little arguments over the grocery bills when I moved in with her last year after selling my car repair shop. She said it made sense me selling the house, her getting more space for the kids, and us saving money by combining households. It felt practical at the time. I sold the house, I handed over the savings. I trusted her. The first few months were all right. Her husband, Jason, was polite but distant. The kids were sweet, though they mostly stared at their screens. The guest room was small, but I was grateful. Then things started to shift. She stopped asking how my day was. Jason began locking the fridge with some excuse about diet plans. I noticed the utility bills started arriving in my name. When I asked, she said, "It's just easier this way." I didn't argue. I wanted peace, but peace comes at a cost. One evening, after dinner, if you could call cold leftovers dinner, she sat across from me at the kitchen table, fingers drumming on her phone. "Dad," she said, not looking up, "we need to talk about rent." I blinked. "Rent? Yeah, I mean we all have expenses, and with you staying here I think it's fair." I didn't say anything right away. I didn't trust my voice. "You get your pension, don't you? You can easily contribute. Jason and I have been shouldering a lot lately. It's only fair." Fair, that word again. I nodded slowly, not because I agreed, but because I didn't know what else to do. The next few days, I felt like a ghost in the house. The laughter that used to fill the rooms seemed distant. I caught Jason glancing at me like I was some old burden they couldn't get rid of. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was a rainy Friday. My knees were aching. I'd just come back from the doctor with some not-so-great news about my blood pressure and the arthritis creeping into my hands. As I walked into the house, wet and tired, I saw a note on the table. "Dad, you need to start paying $650 a month beginning next week or find somewhere else to stay. Love, Leela." Love, that word stung more than the amount. I stood there for a long time, reading it over and over. I don't know what I was expecting. An apology, a hug, maybe even her standing behind me with a sheepish grin saying it was all a joke. But no one came. I packed a small bag that night, just the essentials, a few photos, a change of clothes, my medicine, and the next morning, before anyone woke up, I stepped out. I didn't leave a note. I went straight to the bank. I pulled what little was left from my savings. Then I called a realtor and said, "Sell the rest. Everything, the shop tools and storage, my old camper, all of it." He asked if I was sure. Never been more. I'd booked a room in a quiet part of town, an old motel with cracked walls and kind staff. I spent my days walking, thinking, replaying moments like an old movie. I couldn't turn off. My phone rang a few times in those first days. Lila probably wondering where I'd gone. I didn't answer. She sent messages. "Dad, are you okay? Where did you go?" I didn't mean it like that. "Can we talk?" But silence has a way of speaking louder than any words. I didn't block her. I just watched her texts go from worry to frustration to guilt, each one revealing more than the last. "You can't just disappear like that. Jason says you're being dramatic. The kids miss you." I miss you, but something had shifted in me. A line had been crossed, not by the demand for money, but by the way she made me feel like I didn't belong in the very life I helped build. I stayed in that motel for weeks, got to know the manager, a soft-spoken man named Rafik, who brought me fresh coffee every morning. There was an older woman in the room next to mine, Maria, widowed, lonely. We shared stories by the balcony some evenings. She told me about her son, who moved away and rarely called. "Funny how they grow up," she said one night, her voice trembling, "and forget who held their hands when they learned to walk." I nodded, said nothing, but I felt every word. One morning I checked my bank account, not much left, but enough. I walked to a lawyer's office I'd seen a few blocks down, told him I wanted to rewrite my will. "Do you have any children?" he asked. I paused, looked out the window. I did. He didn't press, just nodded. We talked through the details, set everything in place. Then I made one final call, to a man I hadn't spoken to in decades, my brother, Henry. We had a falling out over something small back then, petty pride, but the years had softened us. "Is that really you?" he asked, the voice cracking. "Yeah." I said, "I'm tired, Henry, and I think I need my big brother." He drove down the next day, picked me up in his old pickup. Didn't ask too many questions. "We'll figure it out," he said, patting my shoulder. And just like that, I had somewhere to belong again. I didn't tell Leela where I went. I didn't need to. But I left behind something else, a letter, one that would reach her eventually, not out of revenge, but so she'd understand, so she'd feel what it meant to lose someone not by death but by choice. And in that silence, maybe she'd realize the value of a father's love. Maybe. Henry's place was nothing fancy, just a modest 2-bedroom cottage tucked into the edge of a quiet town where the wind still whistled through trees and folks waved at each other without needing a reason. It wasn't the kind of home you'd find in a magazine, but it had warmth. And after what I'd been through, that mattered more than marble countertops or smart thermostats. Henry was older now, of course, white hair, slower steps, but his spirit hadn't aged one bit. He joked like he always did when we were boys, the same dry humor and sudden bursts of laughter that pulled me back into the past. It felt strange at first, staying under his roof again after all these years. The last time we shared a roof, we were in our 20s, arguing over borrowed tools and football games. But time humbles a man. Time teaches silence where pride once lived. He didn't ask about Leela right away. Didn't press. He just gave me a bed, a place at the table in his time. Some evenings we sat outside on his porch, nursing warm mugs of tea while the sun disappeared behind the hills. It was during one of those dusky silences that he finally said, "She ever reach out again?" I knew who he meant. I shook my head. Dust texts. Nothing that matters. He leaned back in his chair. Sometimes I think we build them a world so safe, they forget what it took to make it. I didn't respond, because I knew he was right. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. It was about how quickly I'd become a line item in her ledger, a cost, an inconvenience, a ghost in a house I helped her build. And now, I was here trying to remember who I was without being someone's father, someone's burden. It took time. At first I'd wake up and still expect to hear her voice, or see my grandkids run past the door, but it never came. And eventually, the silence became routine. Henry got me helping around the house, fixing the porch steps, replacing the gutters, polishing the old wood floors. And for the first time in months, my hands felt useful again. There was something healing in the rhythm of labor, something pure about using your hands to restore something broken. Henry had a neighbor, Janice, widow, early 60s, wore big sun hats and smelled of jasmine. She'd bring over fresh pies now and then, always with a shy smile and eyes that looked like they'd seen their fair share of pain. "Your brother tells me you're handy," she said one afternoon. "I used to be. Well, my shed door's been crooked for years." I smiled. "Let's take a look." It started with the shed, then her leaky faucet, then the squeaky fence gate. Before long, I found myself helping folks all around the street. Nothing big, just small things. Things most people ignored but couldn't fix. Word spread. They started calling me Mr. Fix-It. And for once I didn't mind the nickname. It gave me a reason to get up in the morning, a purpose. I rolled out, and slowly, the ache in my chest started to dull. But some nights, when the world was quiet, and the only sound was the wind brushing against the house, I'd pull out my phone. I'd read her old messages again. "Where are you? Please, just tell me you're okay. I didn't mean to hurt you. It's just been hard for us too." I shouldn't have written that note. Jason pushed me. I wasn't thinking, "Can we just talk?" She never called. Only messages. And I never replied, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know how to speak without bleeding. One afternoon, while cleaning out the attic for Henry, I found an old photo album. Us as boys. Our parents young and full of life. Camping trips, snowball fights, birthdays. Then photos of Leela, her first bike ride. Me and her on the beach the day she graduated high school, hugging me tight with tears in her eyes. I held the album in my hands for a long time, so many lives ago, and then tucked into the last page something unexpected. A photo I hadn't seen in years. Leela, no older than 6, holding a handmade card that said, "Best Papa in the World." Her handwriting crooked. A little drawing of me with a cape. I pressed the photo to my chest and closed my eyes. For the first time in months, I let myself cry, not out of anger but out of grief. For the years I wouldn't get back, for the version of her that was gone, and for the part of me that still loved her despite it all. Days turned into weeks. Spring bloomed. Birds filled the morning air with song. Janice started inviting me to her garden. She showed me how to tend roses, how to prune them just right. "You have a gentle hand," she said one morning. "Guess that's all I have left." She looked at me, really looked. "Don't be so sure." There was something about the way she said it that stayed with me. Henry noticed the change to lighter. He said over dinner, "Like you're breathing again." "I think I am." Still, I kept the phone nearby, even if I never answered, even if I wasn't ready. Then one afternoon, I got a knock on the door. A man stood there, mid-30s, worn blazer, nervous eyes. "Are you Mr. Harris?" "Who's asking?" "I'm Marcus. I work with your daughter. She asked me to find you." My heart dropped. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "Why didn't she come herself?" "She's tried. She's been trying. She said she didn't know how to make it right." I crossed my arms. "And you? Why are you here?" He looked down, uncomfortable. "She's in trouble, financially, emotionally. Jason's gone, took everything, left her with the kids in a pile of debt." The wind stilled. She didn't know who else to turn to. My throat tightened. She had me. and she let me go. I know, he said softly. She knows too. I looked out toward the street, the sky above golden with dusk. Tell her I'm alive, that's all. He nodded. I turned and walked back inside, heart pounding. Henry looked up from the table. Who was that? Someone from the past. He didn't press and I didn't explain. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, questions swirling. Was I being cruel? Was I protecting myself? Was I teaching her a lesson or just building a wall I'd never want her to climb? I didn't know. Morning came like a whisper. I made coffee, sat on the porch, waited for the sun. The phone buzzed. A new message. I'm sorry. Just that. 2 words, but for the first time I didn't feel anger, just sorrow and something else, hope. I stared at the message on the screen for a long time. Just 2 words. I'm sorry, but they carried the weight of everything unsaid. The nights I sat alone in that cold guest room, the sting of her voice telling me to pay or leave, the hollow feeling. As I packed my bag without saying goodbye, regret doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just whispers. And that morning, it whispered through a glowing screen with more power than I expected. I didn't reply, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what to say. Instead, I set the phone down, grabbed my coat and walked out into the crisp morning. There the road was quiet, lined with the golden remains of last night's wind-blown leaves. Birds hopped along fences. A dog barked in the distance. Life, still moving. I wandered past Janice's garden. She was already out there, white hat pulled low, her hands deep in the earth. Morning, she called out without looking up. Morning. She stood, wiped her hands on her apron. You look like a man carrying too many thoughts. I offered a tired smile. It's been that kind of morning. She tilted her head. Want to talk about it? I shrugged. Not yet. Then just sit with me. So I did. She handed me a cup of tea, already waiting on the porch. We sat in silence for a while, just listening to the world breathe. Eventually I asked, do you ever feel like forgiveness is more complicated than people make it seem? She looked at me, soft eyes tracing the lines on my face. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, and it's not about excusing. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of the pain, whether they deserve it or not. I nodded slowly, the tea warm in my hands. I thought of Lila. Alone now. No Jason, no help, just her and the kids, the same kids who used to sit on my lap and listen to bedtime stories. How many nights had I missed since walking away? I wondered what they thought of me now. Did they ask where I went? Did they think I stopped loving them too? I didn't want to be the kind of man who abandoned family, but I also didn't want to return to a house where love had been replaced with ledgers. It wasn't an easy balance. Henry was on the porch when I returned. He looked up from his crossword. You were out a while, just thinking. Dangerous habit. I chuckled and sat beside him. Do you think people can change, Henry? Like really change? He folded the paper and set it aside. Sure, people can change, but it usually takes something breaking first. I thought about that. Something had broken. In her, in me, in both of us, but maybe that break was where the light could finally get in. I picked up my phone again that evening. Message still glowed. I'm sorry. My fingers hovered over the screen. Then slowly, I typed, I know. I hit send before I could over it. I set the phone down and stepped away. Letting go of bitterness doesn't happen all at once, but this was a start. The reply came the next morning. Can we meet? Just talk, no expectations. I didn't answer right away. I read the message 3 times. My stomach twisted. I wanted to see her, but I was also afraid of seeing the guilt in her eyes, afraid of what I'd say, afraid of what I wouldn't. I showed the message to Henry. He raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? I don't know. Part of me wants to go, part of me wants to keep my distance. That's normal, he said. But here's the question. What will you regret more, going or not going? I didn't answer, because deep down, I already knew, so I texted back. 1 hour the bench near the old train station. It was a place she'd remember. We used to go there when she was little, watch the trains go by, eat ice cream on hot afternoons, laugh about how the pigeons always seemed to find her. I got there early. The bench hadn't changed, a little worn, one leg slightly uneven but still there. Still standing just like me. I waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I almost stood to leave, and then I saw her hair pulled back, dark circles under her eyes, a slow, uncertain walk like someone approaching a stranger. She stopped a few feet away. Hi, Dad. My throat tightened. I nodded hi. She sat beside me, careful, quiet. For a few minutes we said nothing, just watched. A train rumble past in the distance. I don't even know where to start, she said finally. Then don't, I replied. Just speak. She took a shaky breath. I messed up. I let Jason influence me. I forgot what mattered. And when you left, I realized how much space you took up, not just in the house, but in our lives. I looked straight ahead. You treated me like a tenant, not your father. Tears welled in her eyes. I know, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. I stayed quiet when Jason left. She continued. I felt so stupid. Like everything I thought I knew just collapsed. He left debts. Lies. The kids keep asking why you're gone. I don't know what to tell them. That hit hard. You tell them, I said slowly, that I didn't stop loving them. I just stopped waiting to be treated like I didn't matter. She nodded, wiping her face. I want to fix things, not for money, not out of guilt, just ... I want my dad back. That silence between us grew heavy again. Then I turned to her. It's going to take time. I understand. I need to see that this isn't just words. I'll show you. We sat there a little longer than then, for the first time in a long while. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I didn't move, didn't speak, but inside something shifted. The beginning of a bridge. Still fragile, but real. Later that week, she came to visit Henry's place. She brought the kids. They ran to me shouting, "Grandpa." Like no time had passed. I held them close. Tears stung my eyes. And that evening, as they sat on the floor drawing pictures, and Leela helped Janice in the kitchen, Henry looked over and said, "Feels like home again." I nodded, but I wasn't ready to move back. Not yet. Some wounds need more than a bandage. They need proof, they need healing, and healing takes time. Still, I let the door stay open a little wider than before. The hospital hallway stretched ahead like a tunnel carved from silence. Each step I took felt too loud against the cold tile, like my presence didn't belong there anymore. Margaret had dropped me off and promised to come back later with a change of clothes, but her parting hug lingered in my chest like the only warmth I had left. When I reached Emily's room, the door was slightly open. I stood for a second before pushing it wider. She was sitting up in bed, her small frame lost in a nest of white sheets. The heart monitor beeped gently in the background, and the filtered morning light from the window painted her face in gold and pale shadows. She didn't look at me when I walked in, just stared straight ahead at the TV, playing a children's cartoon without sound. I sat down in the chair beside her. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile. Her eyes flicked to me. There was no anger in them, but there was something colder, something I didn't recognize. A sort of quiet disappointment. "Mom used to sit there," she whispered. I nodded. "I know." We sat in silence for a while. The cartoon flickered and danced on the screen. "Did you sell the house?" she asked suddenly. Her voice was thin but sharp. I felt my throat tighten. "Yes, you didn't tell me." I hesitated. "I didn't want to upset you." She turned her head then, her eyes meeting mine with a calm that made me uneasy. "You didn't want to explain. That's different." I looked away. The truth settled between us like dust on untouched furniture. "Margaret helped me get through a lot," I said. "She's been kind, more than kind." Emily said nothing. Outside the window, a tree branch swayed in the wind, brushing shadows across the floor. "You still have me, Emily." She blinked slowly. "Do I?" I reached out to take her hand, but she pulled it under the blanket. "You gave everything to her, and I don't just mean the house." Her words sliced through me. Double quotes, "Emily, please, I never meant for this to happen." "You let it happen." She said it so simply, like a fact she'd memorized. I slumped back in the chair. My mind wandered to the day I signed the papers, to the moment I walked out of the house for the last time, thinking it would somehow bring peace. I was wrong. "Do you think Mum would have agreed with you?" she asked, eyes still locked on mine. I felt my heart cave in. "No," I said softly. "She'd be heartbroken." Emily turned back to the screen. The cartoon characters moved without a sound, like ghosts. "I wish she was still here." "So do I." Silence. Again I looked at the tubes attached to her arm, the pale skin beneath the tape. She looked fragile, like a memory more than a person. "The doctors say you're doing better." I tried. She gave a small shrug. "I'm tired." "Tired is okay. Rest is good." She didn't answer. I stayed there until a nurse came in and told me visiting hours were up. As I stood, Emily said, "You don't have to come tomorrow." I froze. "I want to." "I know, but you don't have to." Her voice was steady, detached. It scared me more than her anger ever had. I nodded, not knowing what else to say. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall and rubbed my face with both hands. It felt like I was trying to wake up from a dream that refused to end. Margaret called while I was outside waiting. "How is she distant?" I said. "I don't know if I'm helping or making things worse." "She's hurting," Margaret replied. "Sometimes pain looks like anger." She told me not to come tomorrow, then come the day after, or the day after that, but don't disappear. I didn't respond. Back at Margaret's house, I sat on the porch long after the sun went down. She brought me tea and sat beside me. Neither of us said anything. The stars were quiet, and the world felt wide and empty. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the cup. She noticed but didn't mention it. A dog barked in the distance, and a car passed by slowly, headlights cutting across the lawn. "You look like you're carrying ghosts," Margaret said finally. "I feel like I am. Maybe it's time to put some down. Not all of them, just one." I didn't know how. The next morning I went back to the hospital despite what Emily said. She didn't look surprised to see me. Just tired. "I brought something," I said, pulling a small photo album from my bag. She eyed it. "What is it?" "Memories. Your mum, you, even me." She didn't reach for it. I opened the cover anyway, a picture of her in pigtails, holding a stick of cotton candy bigger than her head. Her mother stood beside her, laughing. Emily glanced at it. Then another dot and another dot. Little moments. Picnics. Birthdays. Christmas. Mornings. Her mother's handwriting in the margins. Eventually, Emily reached out. Her fingers brushed the page. She turned one, then another. I watched her face, watched her remembering. She loved that blue dress, Emily said. I nodded. She wore it on your first day of school. She cried when the bus drove away. Emily smiled, just barely. We turned pages together. She didn't speak much, but she didn't push me away. When the nurse came again, she asked for 10 more minutes. I sat there, holding the album as she flipped through. And for a moment, it felt like something soft had returned, something small and delicate. Hope, maybe. The kind that doesn't scream, just whispers. When I left, she didn't say not to come back. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't rejection either. Outside, the clouds were gathering. Rain would come, but for now, the wind was warm. I walked to the car slowly, the photo album still in my hands. It felt heavier than before, not with weight, but with time. And memory. And love I thought I'd lost forever. Margaret was in the kitchen when I got back. She looked at the photos. I told her. Margaret turned from the stove. That's something. I nodded. She smiled only a little, but it was real. Margaret didn't say anything, just handed me a plate and poured tea. That night, sleep came slow. Kept seeing my daughter's face as a child, then as she is now. Like two lives were living in her at once. One I knew, one I barely recognized, but I wanted to know her again, all over again, even if it took time, even if it hurt, especially if it hurt. I owed her that. I owed her everything. The air was heavy that night. It wrapped itself around my shoulders, like a wet blanket as I stood outside the house that once held everything. I called my own. My breath left faint clouds on the window as I peered through it, half expecting to see her there, sitting at the dining table, waiting like she used to, eyes bright, smile crooked, calling me her hero. But all I saw was empty space. Furniture that wasn't mine. Walls repainted. Memories scrubbed out like they were stains someone couldn't wait to be rid of. I knocked on the door, not knowing what I'd even say if it opened, but it didn't. I turned away. Maybe that was for the best. I found a motel 2 towns over. Not much more than a bed and a flickering lamp, but the silence was kinder there. I spent days walking with no destination. Each step crunching on leaves, each breeze whispering pieces of old laughter that once filled my home. Sometimes I thought about writing her a letter, but every time I picked up a pen, I felt my hand freeze. What was there to say? That I missed her? That I forgave her? Or that some wounds go too deep for bandages made of words? Weeks passed, then one day I found myself by the lake, the one we used to visit when she was a little girl. I remembered her tiny fingers wrapped around mine as we skipped stones. Look, Papa. I made it jump. She used to shout. Her voice echoed in my head as I stood there now, stone in hand, the water still and unmoving. I let it drop. No skipping today. That evening, I walked past a small bookstore. Inside, a woman was stacking shelves, her laughter soft and warm. She looked up, saw me staring through the glass and smiled, looking for something. She called. I stepped in without knowing why. Books lined every wall, stories that lived long after the people who wrote them had gone. Just wandering, I said. Wandering often leads to the best places, she replied. Her name was Claire. She had eyes that saw more than just what was in front of her. We talked about stories, about silence, about losing things you thought would always stay. She never asked about my daughter. Maybe she didn't need to. Sometimes pain is a language of its own. I began visiting that store more often. Not for the books, for the company, for the way she never tried to fix me. One rainy afternoon, she handed me a journal. Maybe write what you can't say out loud, she suggested, so I did. Pages filled slowly. At first, just scattered thoughts, memories of laughter, moments of betrayal, then deeper things, regret, then hope, fear, the weight of being unwanted in your own blood's eyes. I wrote about that night, the look in her eyes when she said, pay rent or leave, how it wasn't anger I saw, but cold indifference, like I was just another man taking up space. I wrote about the silence after that, how it rang louder than any scream. One day, Claire found the journal on the counter. Do you want me to read it? I nodded. She sat quietly, flipping through pages. When she was done, she looked up, tears threatening the corners of her eyes. You didn't deserve that, she said softly. I didn't respond, because a part of me still wondered if I did. You need to see her again, Claire said one day. I shook my head, not to forgive, not to fix, just to say what's inside you, for you. Weeks passed before I found the courage, but one morning I walked up the same porch I once built with my own hands. Rang the bell. The door opened. And there she was, older, colder. Eyes that once sparkled, now dulled by years. What are you doing here? She asked. I looked past her. Saw a photo on the wall of her with a little boy, my grandson I hadn't even known. My voice shook. I just wanted to say, I loved you more than anything, and losing you hurt more than anything I've ever known. She didn't say a word, just stared. I'm not here to ask for a place or forgiveness. Just let you know what it cost me to walk away. Still, she was silent. I nodded, turned and walked down the steps. Behind me, the door didn't close. It stayed open, and maybe, just maybe, that was something. I returned to Claire's shop that evening. She looked up from the counter. How did it go? I sat down, stared at my hands. The door stayed open. She smiled gently. Sometimes that's all the hope we get. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of closed doors. The next morning, I walked back to the lake. Skimming stones across the surface. I whispered names into the wind. My wife. My daughter. My grandson. Each name a ripple, each memory a wave, and somewhere between those echoes and the stillness, I found something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace, not because everything was fixed, but because I'd finally let it breathe. And in that space between pain and healing, something new was quietly beginning.